You're absolutely right. Okay, now we are back. Okay, so basically, you see the difference here between, asking the mountains to actually become God's representatives on earth and taking the responsibility of the equitable distribution of resources. And as I said, the mountains refused. They said, we can't. We won't be able to shed such responsibility. It's just too much for us. Whereas man, of course, was very quick and jumped into it immediately. So that's basically what we mean by Khalifa. Khalifa means representative, the representative of God on earth, or in other words, ruler. That's what Khalifa is, ruler. Okay, then secular Arab nationalism that was spearheaded by Nasser, President Nasser of Egypt, advocated the separation of state and religion and supported the creation of state capitalism. So, this was basically one of the things that the Arab people opened their eyes to after getting their independence. And that is, Arab nationalism, basically, that Nasser fought so hard for. And Nasser's goal was to simply unite the Arab countries under one banner and, make the Arab countries become again a powerful entity in the world that will be able to contribute to civilization and to become a productive society, etc. He obviously did a lot of good things, Nasser, but he also made a lot of mistakes. And as a result, his dreams were never able to come to fruition simply because of the mistakes that he made. And, some of the mistakes actually were forced upon him, to be fair to President Nasser, of course, because some people feel that, he was. He made mistakes in terms of going into war with Israel in 1967, which pretty much destroyed Egypt. And President Nasser was basically not prepared for that war. And some Nasser's critics have said that, well, why go into war with Israel in the first place? In other words, why spend all these resources and waste all these resources into something that you're not able to implement, to execute efficiently? So, they put a blame on President Nasser for that. But in fact, President Nasser um, was never the culprit in the 1967 war. It was obviously Israel that started the war in 1967, and Israel felt that that was an opportune, a golden opportunity to destroy Egypt, which is the largest Arab country with the largest Arab army, because they felt that Egypt posed a threat. And if they are able to take Egypt out of the equation, then Israel will really have nothing to worry about down the road. So that was basically the policy of Israel at the time, was to destroy President Nasser because they felt President Nasser posed a threat. President Nasser had a goal, he had a plan, he had a program. He was very much interested in reviving the Arab world. He was very much interested in making the Arab countries become economically powerful. He was interested in, secular Arab nationalism. Um, he was very much interested in separating religion from politics. All of these things the Israelis looked at and they said, hey, if we give this guy a carte blanche, we don't know what's going to happen to us 10 years down the road. So why not take the opportunity right now when we know we can actually destroy him? And that's exactly what Israel did. Israel was very successful in the Six-Day War, and they pretty much destroyed the Egyptian army, the Jordanian army, and the Syrian army. All those three armies were pretty much destroyed. And the reason, of course, was simply because the Arabs did not have a very powerful air force. They had, when it comes to ground forces, yes, they had ample ground forces. But when it came to air superiority, they had nothing. And of course, you're talking about the Arab world is probably half desert. So if there is any war to be waged, it's going to be waged in deserts, in open air, if you will. And, they basically did not have any air superiority to actually protect their ground forces. And Israel at the time, they had the most sophisticated air force, which was obviously given by the US and Europe, because that's where Israel got most of its support, the US and Europe. And the Arabs got their support from Russia, where obviously when it comes to comparing the armaments, Russian armaments with American armaments, there is obviously no comparison whatsoever. So, if a war is to start, you pretty much have a good idea of who is going to win that war. And obviously, Israel won the war fair and square, and they pretty much destroyed all the Arab armies. So this really pushed the Arabs backward. And it made it extremely difficult for them to actually start rebuilding. It took some time. Now, efforts to integrate the region's trade, labor, investment, and the flow of capital have shown only modest success. And there are a lot of reasons why the Arabs were not able to integrate their trade or their labor or the flow of capital, even though they tried. But their efforts showed very little and modest success. Now, there were few attempts made to integrate the MENA region into the world economy. There was rising sectarian and ethnic feuds that divide the region, which complicates the possible integration. In other words, most of these countries were pretty much immersed in their ethnic feuds and the religious divisions that pretty much divided them. And as a result, they paid very, very little attention to possible integration. There was weaknesses of the private sector, of course, and the rise of crony capitalism. Both of these together, with the implementation of the ISI, are blamed for integration failures. Now, fragmented regional markets in goods and services have made the vision of a more politically unified MENA region more difficult to achieve. In other words, regional markets were very, very much fragmented. They were not integrated at all. And the reason simply has to do with lack of transportation, lack of infrastructure. All of this pretty much, were an obstacle to these markets becoming integrated. So it was very, very difficult for the regional markets to integrate. They were pretty much fragmented. Um, MENA have failed also to take advantage of the benefits from open economies, such as the accumulation of knowledge, transfer of technology, and competition. They failed big time to take advantage of all of these things that a lot of countries actually took advantage of, especially countries in Southeast Asia that were pretty much successful in integrating their economies with the rest of the world. They were able actually to take advantage of all the available knowledge, the transfer of technology, and also competition. Whereas the MENA region were fast asleep. They pretty much did not take advantage of all of these things that were, before them. And as I said, many reasons for that. The reasons, obviously, we just discussed: the war, the tribal feuds, the religious division, the ethnic division. I mean, the MENA region was going through a lot of turmoils. And as a result, we're really not focused, basically. And, they paid a heavy price for all of this. So, again, the region represents about 4% of the world economy, and its share of global exports is about 5%. However, don't be fooled by this 5% figure. Why? Because 85% of this 5% is oil exports. So when you look at the region's share of non-oil exports of goods and services, it's only about 1.2%, which is extremely, extremely low. And I don't know, policymakers, what are they thinking when they look at these numbers? Don't they feel that, they have to make improvements? They have to promote the exports of non-oil. In fact, this is one of the things that they need to focus on. So the region's share of non-oil exports of goods and services is about 1.2%, which simply means that oil exports still dominate the region's trade. And this is something that we talked about all along, if you remember, focusing on only oil and not trying to pretty much, have your economy do other things rather than simply producing oil. This is something that, again, we talked about, if you remember, and we said that this is one of the biggest problems that the MENA region's economy were facing. Trade and services, such as banking, insurance, transportation, telecommunication, and retailing are very, very important for productivity and global competition. But if you look at the MENA's share in global service trade, it stands at only 2.8%. Again, another weakness. So they have to do a much better job in trade in the service sectors, because these services, as I just mentioned, are pretty much conducive to enhancing productivity and global competition, which the MENA region requires if they are to integrate their economies successfully. Now, intra-regional trade has also been very weak. In other words, trade between the countries themselves, between the MENA countries. Now, again, there are about 18 countries in the MENA region. And intra-regional trade has been very weak. Why? Simply because of lack of competitiveness, administrative red tape, and poor transport-related infrastructure, as well as the lack of product differentiation, which means that most countries in the MENA region happen to be making and producing exactly the same good. The regional market in MENA is fragmented, which obviously going to impede global integration. So far, only 13 countries in the MENA region have joined the WTO. Few have entered into investment agreements with the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's what OECD stands for. In other words, the richest industrialized countries. In 1997, Arab countries attempted to establish a free trade area called GAFTA, which stands for Great Arab Free Trade Area. This was, this trade area pretty much focused on reducing and even eliminating a lot of tariffs that existed between these countries. However, its effect was very limited and was soon abandoned. It's another problem here, that really a lot of these countries in the MENA region have to put straight. Why, for example, why did GAFTA fail? I mean, policymakers should go and look into that, basically. Why did this fail? What were the problems? What were the obstacles? Because GAFTA, I think, if a lot of these countries took seriously, it could have pretty much provided a good stepping stone, if you will, for the MENA region to succeed and to participate in global integration. But as I said, not much attention was given. And, a lot of these countries felt, hey, probably this is not something we want to have. And they were pretty much felt it was irrelevant, felt that, it didn't add much, it didn't bring much value. And all of these things are problems. These are some of the things why the Arab region has not been doing very well, is because they never look at an idea and try to implement it to the fullest. They give up very easily. When they see something not going their way, they simply step aside and abandon the whole idea rather than saying, hey, wait a minute, what did go wrong here? Why this idea did not bring the outcome that we expected? What can we do differently? All of these things basically are not being discussed at all. In other words, there is no system of evaluation. And this is pretty much lacking in the Arab region. You have to have a system that will help you evaluate projects, will help you to evaluate plans, economic programs, uh, economic objectives. Unfortunately, in the MENA region, all of these happens to be lacking. So I'm just giving you some ideas here that you can work on if you get a question like this in the final exam. As far as economic integration in the Arab world, and why has it failed? What were the weaknesses? Basically, you can build on this ideas. Okay.
Professor,
Yes.
is this kind of similar to our conversation that we had last week about why like Islam like wasn't successful, like how it was implemented, and then after a course of years, the anticipated success wasn't there because of outside events such as like terrorism or outside groups coming in and kind of ruining the purpose. Does that apply to things like GAFTA, where like if outside things hadn't happened, it could have been successful, but yet
Yeah.
it just,
Yes, very good. Excellent point. Yeah, you pretty much hit it on the head. You pretty much have made the right analysis here, and you put your hands on the wounds basically. Yeah, these are the problems. These are the issues. These are the
Mhm.
real issues, and these are very, very practical issues. And if you remember when I told you that I worked as an advisor in the Ministry of Planning for Libya, I was able to see a lot of these issues and a lot of these problems in front of me. And unfortunately, I was not able to do anything about it. Can someone say why? Does anyone have any idea why you are really not able to do anything about it? What is the thing that really puts constraints or obstacles for making
every
any changes?
every state and nation wants to have their own sovereignty, so you can't tell people what to do even if it's for the region's best interest. They have to want it themselves.
Yeah, very good. And the other thing is, I felt that policymakers, the ones who actually make the decisions, because you're only an advisor, you don't make decisions. You simply advise, you give your opinion. But when it comes to making policies, you don't make policies. And this is the problem that I really had to struggle with. My problem was trying to convince policymakers to actually be patient and to actually see the project till the end and to do everything in their power to promote that project, because the end result is going to be extremely beneficial for the country itself. In other words, a lot of these policymakers are very, very short-sighted. They want everything now. They don't have the patience. They can't wait. And this is a problem. It's a huge problem. Okay, so moving forward, for trade agreements and trade liberalization to work, countries have to have sufficient capital for investment in industries that have potential for growth and competition. Now, if you can't allocate those resources for this type of activities, then obviously you're going to face a lot of obstacles down the road. So again, for trade agreements and trade liberalization to work, countries must set aside sufficient amount of capital for investment in industries that will have the potential for growth and that will have a potential to compete with the rest of the world. In other words, what you need to do here is you need to harness competition, basically. Because if you can't do that, then you can't hope to compete with the rest of the world. Then you can't integrate your economy with the rest of the world. You have to be able to compete. Trade and financial reforms are also urgently needed in the MENA region. Unfortunately, very, very little is done in these two areas, trade reform and financial reform. These reforms are really not taken very seriously. And a good example, by the way, just recently, if you look at what's happening in Lebanon, I'm sure some of you are familiar with what's going on in Lebanon, right? Anyone is from Lebanon here? No? No one is from Lebanon? Anyone is familiar with what's going on with the Lebanese economy?
Isn't there like currently two separate governments trying to take power in Lebanon right now?
Oh, not really, no. First of all, they don't have a government. They're trying to form a government, but they're not able to come to any agreement to forming a government.
Yeah, two different powers.
Yeah, but what are the problems? What are the real issues that are facing Lebanon today?
I'm not too sure about that.
The lack of financial and trade reforms. They need to make the necessary reforms. That's what the IMF has been calling the Lebanese government to do for the past 10 years. And the Lebanese government has shun away from that. They tried to postpone financial and trade reforms from 1 year to the next, saying that the country is not ready for these financial reforms, for trade reforms. So now what you see happening in Lebanon is that Lebanon has a huge financial crisis. The whole country is going bankrupt. People have lost their bank deposits. The bank is not able to pay them back. Now, can you imagine if someone, has been saving for the past 20, 30 years? Because a lot of these Lebanese actually work outside Lebanon. And they have been working and saving and sending their money and depositing them in Lebanese banks. And now, all of that has pretty much evaporated. They really don't have any money in the banks. And the banks are saying, we don't have the money to pay you. So what are these people supposed to do now? When all their life savings is put in banks, and now the banks are reneging on that responsibility. And they're saying, you know, we're out of money. We don't have money. And of course, the exchange rate crisis in Lebanon is you know, it used to be, I guess, $1 is equivalent to maybe 1,000 lira. Now, $1 is probably equivalent to 10,000 lira. Which means that the lira has lost value. And people can't even buy necessities because, you know, most of the things that they actually import from overseas. And right now, you know, the Lebanese government doesn't have the money to buy goods from overseas because they don't have enough foreign exchange to be buying these goods. And it's creating a lot of problems, havoc in the Lebanese economy. And I don't know what the end result is going to be. I know that, you know, the country's going to go bankrupt, basically. I mean, you know, they really have no money. And this is a huge problem. So, you know, these are some of the things that the MENA region really have to take all of these things very seriously, and they have to plan for these things. They have to be patient. They have to persevere, and they have to make sure that you know, all these economic plans that they put forward are functional plans and not dysfunctional. And then, of course, a more innovative, competitive, and dynamic private sector is needed for trade to become an effective vehicle for economic growth. It's also another very, very important thing that the Lebanese government really has to take into consideration. The MENA has relied excessively on the oil market to engage in global economic integration. And this is bad. You can't depend on one product, especially when the product has both of its demand and supply highly inelastic, which would bring in huge volatility in the marketplace. So you just can't rely excessively on this good, which is oil, to engage in any sort of global economic integration. Now, international economic integration, of course, is defined in terms of what? It's simply defined in terms of flow of goods and services, flow of capital, flow of labor. So the more the flow of goods and services there are, the more integrated a country is, the more the flow of capital, the more integrated the country will be, and the more the flow of labor, the more integrated a country will be into the rest of the world's economies. The MENA region relied heavily on external debt during the 1980s to delay the necessary economic reforms, which I just talked about a few minutes ago, that they were required to implement by the IMF. In the 1990s and 2000s, debt creating capital was reduced enormously from both public and private sources, which really put a lot of strain on these economies. The region did not take advantage of the huge expansion in global credit markets that took off in the 1990s, but ended abruptly in the 2007 financial crisis. Now, most of the capital inflows comes from GCC pledges. In 2013, this amounted to about $43 billion, mostly in soft loans and commodity aid. And much of the financing is used to support budget and balance of payments deficits. Foreign direct investment inflows is also very crucial for the MENA region. It can expand the manufacturing sector, which is the major source for job creation. It also brings much needed technology and management know-how that will boost productivity, which is important for competition and for global integration. Most of the foreign direct investment went into non-tradables, such as mining and oil. Less was allocated to manufacturing and agriculture. The largest share of foreign direct investment came from multinational corporations and went to the oil sector and the construction sector. Labor migration in MENA has transformed the political economy in the region more than has trade in goods and services or capital flows. Now, somewhere between 18 and 20 million Arabs were working outside their country of origin in 2010. About half of the Arab migrants worked in Arab countries, mostly in the GCC countries. There are economic as well as social costs and benefits to immigration. Labor shortages and bottlenecks in specific industries, and less overcrowding in schools, and the use of social infrastructure. All of these are social costs and benefits. In other words, the labor shortages and bottlenecks in specific industries can actually be mitigated through immigration. So the labor shortages that existed in the GCC countries and the bottlenecks in the specific industries were pretty much taken care of by labor immigration from labor abundant countries. And also in the labor abundant countries, there are benefits to this immigration. In other words, now you have less overcrowded schools. And obviously you have better use of social infrastructure. Why? Because a lot of these people have left to the GCC countries. So immigration has pretty much lowered unemployment. It has increased wages and also lowered poverty in the sending countries. So you can see there are costs and there are benefits to immigration. And that's basically, you know, some of the things that we can see that were, well, as far as labor is concerned, I think labor immigration, that's one of the what shall I say here? It's one of the brighter spots for economic integration in the MENA region. The flow of labor. Whereas when it comes to the flow of trade and the flow of capital, a lot has to be done in those areas. In other words, not much has taken place. And I guess, I just gave you the reasons why we really didn't have that much capital flowing from different countries in the MENA region, nor why trade has not been promoted to the fullest extent possible. So there are a lot of weaknesses, and these countries, they really have to put their fingers on these type of weaknesses, and they need to find solutions in terms of enhancing their infrastructure, in terms of making their markets less fragmented, in terms of pretty much promoting foreign direct investment between the different countries. So all of these things are very, very important. And unfortunately, the MENA region has not been very successful in finding solutions to these different types of issues that we just talked about. They will continue to have these issues, to have these problems, as long as they do not seriously find a more comprehensive, more integrative economic plans that will try to pretty much enhance the economic activities between these different countries. And I guess, I'm going to stop right there. That's all basically all that I need to say in as far as globalization and economic integration in the MENA region. Still, there is a long, long way to go for the MENA region to become fully integrated with the rest of the world. Before they're able to do that, I think what they need to do is to find ways to integrate regionally. And then from there, use it as a stepping stone, if you will, towards the larger global integration. But first, I think they should focus on regional integration. And from there, go towards global integration. So there are a lot of areas that they need to pretty much focus on, address a lot of issues that must be addressed before they're able to, in fact, become successful in becoming fully integrated with the rest of the world. Any questions? For the 10 minutes that we have left, anyone has any questions?
I do have a question, Professor. So I know with like a lot of corporations, oftentimes they will take their production overseas for either like cheaper labor costs, or some countries have just built up that infrastructure. In the MENA region, has the region itself prevented companies from coming into those areas and bringing business, or have businesses chosen not to establish, like factories or plants in that area? Like, is it, what side is kind of resisting that development? Because
Very good question. And the answer to that question is both.
Mhm.
In other words, the MENA region has really not promoted multinational corporations to come in and do business. And the multinational corporations have not found it in their benefit to go and invest in countries that are highly unstable politically.
Right.
So it's both ways, and this is unfortunate. So you see the challenges that the MENA region is going through. A lot of challenges, and things are really not moving in their direction.
Yeah, it definitely seems that if they could, internally be able to provide some confidence to corporations that,
Yeah.
things wouldn't go wrong, um, they would need foreign investment to help them kind of establish because they're so far behind.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, like you said, it is very interesting, and the problem does not stem from one area. There's
Mhm.
kind of a lot of different things to factor in.
Exactly. It makes it very complicated. Very complicated. Any other question? Well, yeah, these are good questions that you're posing. Very, very good questions. Any other questions? Okay, then we will leave it right there. And hopefully I'll see you this Thursday. And on Thursday, we will pretty much go over the final exam and also go over any questions that you may have. But there's one more thing that I would like to stress, and that is, please make sure you look at your grade book. If you detect any inconsistencies in your grade, please let me know immediately. Don't wait until I submit your grade and then tell me, well, professor, I am missing, a score on my first class presentation, or I'm missing a score on my midterm, or, my midterm score is not what you gave me. Please make sure you go through your grade book, go through all your scores, make sure that everything is intact. And if you detect any discrepancies, please let me know immediately. Otherwise, if you don't, it would be extremely difficult for me to make a great change. Because making a great change, it's very strenuous. It's not an easy thing to do. I really have to go through so many things, and it's time consuming, and also it involves a lot of red tape that I really have to maneuver myself through, because I really need more than one signature, and sometimes it's very difficult to get all the signatures together. It's very difficult to explain why I have to make the grade change, etc., etc. So it's really it's very strenuous activity. So please make sure that you look at your grade book, and if you detect any discrepancies, immediately let me know. Okay?
Professor, that would exclude the presentation too, right? Because you're going to
Yes.
relook at that. Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, I will hopefully put that through today. As I said, I don't know why you don't have it. You should, have all those scores, but I need to go back and find out the reason why. As I said, probably because I did not save it. I don't know, but you should be able to have it today. Later on this afternoon, once I'm finished with my next class, which ends at about 4 o'clock, then I will look into it and make the necessary changes.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Professor.
You're welcome. Okay, then, if there are no more questions, I'll see you on Thursday.
We'll see you on Thursday, Professor. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.